Thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is Nick Lee. I'm with the Edible Schoolyard project, and this is our second of a series of online trainings on edible education in adapting to distance learning. And this session is all about cross-curricular connections in edible education. Thanks for taking a second to write on that question and just considering what can be learned through food. A quick session agenda for you today. We're going to do some introductions and norms. We'll do a short mindful eating activity, and then I'll do a presentation on those cross-curricular connections. We'll have Wendy Johnson joining us for a closing activity, and then that should bring us right up till 2 o'clock. And then from 2 to 2:30, there's an optional activity if you wish to stay, and that's going to be participatory. It's kind of a game. It should be fun, doing a little bit of curriculum design practice in a gamified way. Again, my name is Nick. I'm a senior program manager at the Edible Schoolyard, and I've been with the program for 8 years now after starting as an AmeriCorps service member. And I realized that's actually in 2012. I have that wrong on that slide, but I've been with the organization for 8 years now. And I'm lucky to have Raquel Vigil here supporting today.
Hi, everyone. It's very nice to see all of you. I'm the curriculum specialist at Edible Schoolyard Project, and I'm also the co-designer of Edible Ed at Home with Nick. I have a long history of in sustainable food and education, and I love curriculum design around the topics of food. I'm really excited to be here with you to talk about that.
Awesome. So a couple of norms and guidelines for the session. We'll have you keep the mute session on during the presentations. This session will be recorded and made available following the workshop. If you have any technical difficulties, you can use the chat feature, and Russell Sturton, our community manager, is running the tech side of things today. So he'll do his best to help you out if you chat him. When we get into the breakout sessions, we will ask you to turn your camera and your microphone on if you're comfortable doing so you can participate. And as you're participating, just be mindful and considerate of the people you're in your group with. Make sure that everyone has a chance to speak and that you get a chance to listen to them. So who's in the room? We have 88 people in the room, which is really exciting. And we have, I know from the registration, we have a mix of teachers, educators, cooks, and chefs. And then we're actually going to do a little poll right now for you to tell us a little bit more about yourselves and who you are and what you're teaching. Raquel, do you want to share some of what we're seeing there?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's great. It looks like a lot of us are, educators, teachers, garden teachers, teachers in classrooms. It looks like a good majority of folks are actually pre-K to 2 years old of youth, and actually also a good percentage of folks working in middle school. And it also looks like a large portion, about 74% of folks are working in the field of science or math, some of those core academic subjects, but also things around health and wellness, working in that realm and thinking about social emotional learning as well. And art is exciting to see folks sort of coming from that venue as well. Great.
Thank you. We're going to end the poll here, and then we'll share the results with you just so you can take a peek as well. Kind of exciting to see that. The other thing that I want to call out is it looks like 30% of people will be seeing their students virtually in the fall. Looks like about 10% know that they will be on campus, and a majority of people, 41%, are uncertain as to how they're going to be seeing their students come this fall. I know here in Berkeley, we just got news today from our superintendent that he's going to be recommending to the school board that our schools start all distance-based in the fall. So just acknowledging that sitting with that uncertainty of not knowing how you're going to see your students in the fall can be really tough. And also for those who are thinking about returning to campus, trying to figure out how to do that safely for yourself and for your students. And then for everyone looking to teach online, just continuing to adapt to that to figure out how best to educate our students in the fall when we return to school. So we're actually going to start with a little guided eating activity. Those of you who joined us 2 weeks ago in the training, we're lucky enough to have Wendy Johnson do this for us live. And today we're actually going to listen to a recorded version. This is an activity that I recorded for some of our students at King Middle School. And we're going to do this just as a little opening, grounding ourselves So if you have a small piece of fruit or a snack, go ahead and get that now. If you'd like to turn your camera off as you're doing this, please feel free to do so if that makes you more comfortable to enjoy the experience fully. So with that, I'm going to get that queued up, and this will take just about 3 minutes to spend some time being with the experience of enjoying a piece of food. This is Nick from the Edible Schoolyard. Welcome back to Reflecting on Food. This episode, we're going to do a short mindful eating activity. Get a strawberry or other small piece of fresh fruit before continuing to listen. Really, press pause and go get a berry or slice of fruit right now. Okay, now that you've got your fruit, this activity might feel a little silly, or you might get impatient with it, and that's perfectly normal. Just listen and follow the prompts as best you can. Focus on the food and look at it like you're seeing it for the first time. Turn it over and look at each side. Notice the shape of it. Feel the food texture with your finger. Is it smooth or bumpy? How does it feel? Now, move the food close to your nose and smell. Try closing your eyes and smelling. What does it smell like? Smell it again, breathing deeply this time. Now, take a very small bite and chew it slowly. As you chew, notice the texture. Take another small bite and feel the food on your tongue. Notice the taste. Is it sour or tart? Is it sweet? What does it taste like? Finish the food however you want to eat it. Now notice how you ate it. Did you eat it all in one bite? Or did you continue eating small bites slowly? There is no right answer, just an opportunity to be aware of how you are eating. Mindful eating like this isn't something for every time you eat, but it can be useful if you want to appreciate your food or slow down when you are eating. Try it again with one of your favorite foods and see if you enjoy it more or notice something new about it. Thanks for listening to Reflecting on Food. Okay. So I heard from someone on our team that recording had a little bit of a glitch in it, but we will be providing the link to that recording if you want to use that activity. It was great to see so many of you participating, following along in that. But I hope that was grounding and just reminding of the beauty and the power of food and why we all work to educate and work with youth around food. So our session today is really about cross-curricular learning. And these are our essential questions for today's session. And I'll frame these, I'll talk about the objectives that pair with these essential questions. And so our goals for this session are that you come away from this with a greater understanding or a richer understanding of how edible education can support core academic learning. That you come away from today with a deeper understanding of cross-curricular learning and curriculum design for cross-curricular learning. And also that you have some lessons that you can use. We're going to reference a lot of our lessons that we use in the Edible Schoolyard classroom and in our new online Edible Education at Home series, which is written for distance learning. So we want you to use all of those lessons. Please take them away from this session. At the end of this session, we're going to provide a resource sheet that has links to every lesson that we reference in this. So if you're trying to frantically jot down every lesson that we're referencing, don't worry about it. We've got a resource sheet that we'll send to you with all the links that you need. And then finally, that you have some more practice and experience and confidence in designing cross-curricular experiences around food. Those are our goals for today. I really quickly want to touch on the previous session that we did, which was all about designing curriculum for distance learning. And these were our top tips. This is the too long didn't watch version of that webinar. And the tips are to scale down for success. Note that distance learning is different than in-person learning, and you should scale down to succeed in that. Think student-centered. Think about what the student experience will be. What is the person on the other end of this receiving? What is their experience like? Plan around access issues early in the process rather than making adaptations late. If students don't have access to materials or technology, that's going to be a significant barrier, so plan around that. And finally, work collaboratively and work iteratively. Think of this as an ongoing process. This is a new way of teaching for many of us. We're finding our ground. That's true of me too, in delivering this training. I'm really used to being in the classroom with 30 people in front of me and being able to read the room. And this is a very different experience sitting here looking at my presentation and looking up at a few of you on this other monitor here that I'm lucky enough to see. But we're all adapting to distance learning and teaching in new ways. So we all know that edible education deeply enriches learning. Food is incredibly engaging. I think we all know this from our experiences working with students. When they get in the kitchen or in the garden, or when we bring out some cooking supplies into our science classroom, they get excited. They're looking forward to working with food. They're looking forward to eating. It just creates excitement. And then we also know that kitchens and gardens are versatile classrooms. We really can teach any subject in a kitchen or a garden. They are ripe for cross-curricular learning. I want to note that gardens and outdoor spaces are increasingly being seen as classrooms in this moment in response to the coronavirus pandemic. And outside learning spaces are valuable for schools that are returning to campus and dealing with social distancing in the classroom. I want to point to Green Schoolyards America and their resources on social distancing and the pandemic. Again, this will be in the resource link sheet, but they have a lot of great resources. They've been working with public health departments as well as county offices of education to actually create maps and guidelines and various structures for actually mapping out social distancing in outdoor spaces, as well as guidance from public health authorities around how to use outside spaces as classrooms for schools that are returning in the fall. So again, Green Schoolyards America, that'll be on the resource sheet, and you can just Google them as well. In this workshop, we won't talk much about how to re-enter school gardens or kitchens safely. That question is too specific to your school, your district, your county, and the situation that you find yourself in. So food or lunch as an academic subject. Edible education and food studies are both rapidly growing fields. We've seen this really incredible growth of school garden and cooking programs across the country over the past 20 years. And food studies master's programs are cropping up at universities all over. That said, teaching about food isn't always prioritized in schools. We know that from our own experience, that 25 years ago when we got started at King Middle School, a lot of the teachers didn't want to bring their students out to our garden classroom because they saw it as a waste of minutes. But we know that learning about food is really important for youth. And we also know that learning through food can enrich other learning. And that can be a great hook for engaging teachers, school administrators, and students, and a way to make sure that students have an opportunity to learn about food. So cross-curricular learning is what this is all about. And we're defining cross-curricular learning as learning about multiple subjects at once. Cross-curricular learning makes connections between distinct disciplines, and it also supports students to see a fuller picture, and it helps them find meaning in learning. This is going to be the wonkiest slide of the presentation. So if you're looking at this one and like, oh my God, I'm in over my head, don't worry. This is the only one that's going to be like this. Multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and transdisciplinary learning approaches. Discipline, think of subject, right? So multidiscipline, multi-subject, approaching a topic from multiple distinct disciplines. So let's say if we're learning about strawberries, we might learn about the science of strawberries, looking at their genetics, and then we would learn about math, and we would maybe think about how many seeds are on the outside of a strawberry plant and do some multiplication problems around how many seeds a single plant could produce. That would be multidisciplinary, approaching that topic from different angles. Interdisciplinary is approaching a topic from the intersection of those two disciplines. So finding the space where those two subjects overlap in that approach. So let's say again for our strawberries, looking at, let's see, science and math, thinking about some of the different varieties of strawberries and how many of them produce different different numbers of fruit, and then how many seeds are on that, and using that approach to do some math and science. And then finally, transdisciplinary is combining multiple different disciplines to create a novel approach to a topic. And that one's often harder to define. It's harder to build. It's harder to really realize. But all of these different approaches are cross-curricular. So whether you're doing multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, or transdisciplinary approaches to learning, you are doing cross-curricular learning. You're still teaching multiple subjects at the same time. And that's really what we're going to be focusing on in this workshop. Edible education is inherently cross-curricular. As we saw in that poll, so many of you are teaching multiple subjects already. You're teaching math, you're teaching science, you're teaching about health and wellness and about sustainability in the environment as you're teaching cooking and gardening. I don't think I've encountered a single gardening or cooking teacher yet who teaches very strictly just gardening or just cooking and doesn't engage with any other topic. So many of our favorite lessons at the Edible Schoolyard are cross-curricular. One of my favorites is this chemistry and cooking lesson that we do, where we have the students use red cabbage juice, where we just boil some red cabbages, and that turns out to be a pH indicator. It actually changes color based on the pH of a solution that it's in. So they get to test various things around the kitchen like vinegar and soap, and they get to see this, bright purple liquid change color to a neon pink or a dark blue. And then we test the vinegar and the lemon juice that they're going to use to curdle milk to make ricotta cheese, and they find out that those ingredients are really acidic. So that's just one example of a really rich cross-curricular chemistry and cooking lesson. Biology and gardening, we have so many lessons in the garden about plant anatomy and modes of propagation. When students are learning about asexual propagation of plants in their botany unit in 7th grade science in a textbook, it doesn't feel very exciting. But when they get to learn about how apple trees are grown from grafts and cuttings rather than from seeds, it all comes to life. Finally, I'll just talk about this mathematics and cooking one here. We had a really fun lesson with a math teacher at our school last year who did a whole curriculum, a whole unit around fractions. And the students were working with this pancake recipe in fractions for weeks. And at the end, once they finally completed the unit, they got to come into the kitchen and make pancakes with their own recipes that they had been building through this unit on fractions.
Can I just add one more thing also, that I think that to me, it's also an opportunity really strengthening our ability to do cross-curricular connections, right? I think strengthen the relationships that we can have with teachers in the schools that we work with. I don't, depending upon where we sit and our relationship with kind of more subject-specific teachers, I have found that when I was teaching, gardening, and my ability to sort of make those connections also built those relationships with teachers. So it's also just a really great way to sort of expand and build community around food with kind of in our school communities.
Absolutely. Thanks for adding that, Raquel. So you've gotten to hear a bit about our approach and some of our examples of cross-curricular learning and teaching. And I want to hear from you all. I want for you to share your expertise. So we have 3 questions here that you're going to have a chance to answer. And those are, what lessons have you taught or seen that combine cooking or gardening with another academic subject? So that's what do you know? What do you have? Where are the intersections that you see opportunities to design cross-curricular lessons? So what are the places that you see inspiration or you see opening to do more cross-curricular learning? What are the lessons that you're looking for that others might have already designed? So what are you looking for? What are you seeking? You're going to be able to answer these questions on a Padlet, and this Padlet will be available after the session as well. I'm going to show you really quickly how to use the Padlet, and then we'll give you a link to the Padlet so you can go to it. We'll give you a few minutes to write your answers on the Padlet. And then after that, we'll actually go to a breakout session where you will have a chance to discuss those questions and answers with a couple of other people for a few minutes. So again, you're going to answer these questions on a Padlet, which I'm going to show you how to use. Then you'll have a breakout group to discuss your answers to those questions. So here is the Padlet. And this is, when you click on the link, this is the view that you would have. And here's that first question, a lesson that you can share. What lessons have you taught that combine cooking and gardening with another academic subject? You'll press plus, and you'll be able to write a title. You'll be able to write a description of the lesson. And then if you want, you can even include a photo or a link if you have a lesson plan for that lesson online. If you don't, no worries, you don't have to. This will then appear down below, and this will become a really exciting resource where we have 95 people in the room now, all contributing lessons that they've done around cross-curricular learning, and also naming things that they're looking for that others might be able to answer and help with. Finally, if you have any other questions from the presentation so far, you can put them over here in this column. But again, all you'll do is just click that plus and type your answers to those questions up top, and then also take a second to read through. So we'll have about 4 minutes. I'm gonna get some music queued up, and Russell is going to put a link to this Padlet in the chat. So you should have the chat box pop up, and then you'll be able to click that link to get to the Padlet. So I see people are still contributing on that Padlet, and that is wonderful. Let's keep that going, and let's also bring this discussion from the screen to have an audio component too. So we're gonna go into breakout sessions now, and we'll spend about 5 minutes in those breakouts. So you'll have a chance to talk with a couple of other people about the answers that you put up on that Padlet, about the questions that you put up on that Padlet, and also if you have time to review what others have written on there as well. So Russell, if we could go ahead and launch those breakout sessions. And again, when you get to your breakout, folks, you should be able to take yourself off of mute and turn your camera on so you can speak with the people that you're working with. Thank you everyone for joining us here in the main room. I hope you had the opportunity for some rich discussion in those breakouts, and I can see folks are still adding to that Padlet. I was just talking with Bella here, and she was saying that she was trying to write down things as fast as she could. And I want to remind everybody that that Padlet will be available. So all those lesson ideas that you all just put up there, those will be there. That's not going anywhere. So you can keep that link open, bookmark it, come back to it. You can continue to add to it. I hope that this will be a rich resource and an ongoing resource for everyone. So with that, we're going to move on and continue to talk about cross-curricular learning. And one thing that often comes up is aligning with standards and recognizing that Common Core and next generation science standards are much more process focused than previous state standards. And that's really a great thing because it creates more openings for garden and kitchen based lessons to connect, support, and fulfill those standards. I want to point out that Life Lab is another incredible organization that supports school garden and cooking programs, and they've put together a number of resources on standards alignment for Common Core and next generation science standards in garden education. Again, this will be on our resource link sheet that we'll share at the end of the webinar, and Life Lab has a number of resources, including commonly used or commonly fulfilled standards in garden education, as well as entire webinars on Common Core and standards alignment and next generation and standards alignment. So if you're looking for more on that, definitely check out those resources from Life Lab. The question many of us are asking right now is how do we apply all this cross-curricular stuff to distance learning, which is where many of us are going to find ourselves this fall. And to do that, we're going to talk a little bit about edible education at home, which is a curriculum that Raquel and I have designed and written for students learning at home. These were designed with our students at King Middle School in mind, and also designed to be shared broadly for educators to use all over. Raquel, could you talk a little bit about these themes that we created?
Definitely. Yeah, so when we set out to sort of design what home learning could look like in connection to edible education, we really sort of started to think about what are the different locations of investigations we want people to do. And we kind of identified these themes of imagine, learn, create, connect, imagine, and reflect. And for us, they really represent the themes that are the sort of possibilities of exploring edible education. So the idea is really that kind of learn really centers on kind of more of those kind of core academic subjects and developing sort of food systems knowledges. And then create really looks at kind of how do we connect to the arts, things that are more tangible, what are the sort of more recipe focused things, both in the garden and in the kitchen, that get students to create things, get their hands busy. And then kind of the connect is really thinking about how do we use food in this moment to really get folks to sort of connect to each other, to think about connection in terms of like, how do we use food in the home to build conversations between students and their families. Imagine are really those sort of creative expression places. What is sort of imagining sort of poetry and drawing and creativity, thinking about food in that way. And then finally, reflecting is more of those sort of thinking about food from those kind of more interpersonal, introspective lenses. A lot of our sort of the activity we did at the beginning of this workshop was a lesson that was developed for EE at Home that Nick developed a number of sort of reflecting on food kind of prompts and then lessons and different question prompts to follow up with those kinds of shorter recordings. And then we're also going to go into a couple different cross-curricular lessons we did around strawberries that highlight these different themes of create, imagine, learn, and reflect.
Absolutely. And as Raquel was saying, each of these themes just really hones in what cross-curricular connections we're designing for. And then I also want to note that each theme has its own set of instructional strategies that it kind of narrows to and helps us design new lessons, knowing that those are the strategies that we're going to use. And that's also a plug for our next online training session 2 weeks from today that will focus entirely on online instructional strategies, how to take all these great ideas that we're going to come up with today in this cross-curricular connection session, and how to actually turn those into activities for students through different instructional strategies.
Yeah, also just to add one last thing is that I think also when we were creating these themes, we really thought about, we wanted to think about when we're adapting to distance learning that it may not be that teachers were going to be with their students for extended periods of time like we were previously in the kitchen. So we wanted to create lessons that some of them were 5-minute activities, some of them were sort of 30-minute kind of create your own sort of thing, so that there was more different opportunities to connect at different, even just times, like just all the different ways we could figure out how to connect, which included creating lessons and creating activities that were shorter, that could more manageable, that students could do on their own.
Absolutely. So as Raquel said, we're now going to explore a couple of these edible education at home lessons, all part of a series on strawberries. And the first one that we're looking at right now was within that learn theme and really connected to history and focused on immigration politics as it related to strawberry harvests. So this is an infographic that Raquel created for this lesson. And the other part of this is that it connects to organic agriculture and labor justice, and really engaging with those components of our program. That is, we do want to advocate for organic and fair farming and food. And we see the telling of accurate and complete histories of land, food, and labor as a social justice element of our curriculum. So this whole lesson plan is online. It's available for you to use with your students. And again, this will be in the link sheet, the resource that we provide at the end. Another lesson in that series was on strawberries and pesticides. And this lesson looked at agriculture, sustainability, environmental health, and economics. And after having students watch a couple of videos on the question of strawberries and pesticides and organic strawberry production, it really asked students, should cheap, bountiful, year-round strawberries exist? Are they worth the environmental costs and the human health costs that are involved in producing year-round cheap berries? And one of the things that we see commonly in our lessons is that if we create open-ended questions, that's an opportunity to really engage with different English language arts standards around argumentation. And so by making sure that those lessons end in a way that invites students to debate, consider, and think, we really set up a lot of discussion, argumentation, research that fulfills a lot of English language arts standards. And of course, this lesson is written at an upper middle school to high school level in the level of debate and richness of the content there, but that can scale up and down to different grade levels as well. I think I skipped over one there. Nope. Okay, so this next one, the reflect theme that Raquel was talking about earlier, and that mindful reflecting on food series, and this mindful eating activity, that audio prompt that you heard earlier today, is one where a big part of our classes in person that we wanted to recreate for our students was that experience of eating, and eating intentionally, setting some time aside to eat and focus on food in a different way. And we were thinking about how we could support students to do that at home. And a number of our team were talking about how sometimes we use audio meditation prompts, and that this was a format that we've never created before, but it was something we realized we could do for our students to support them to engage in mindfulness at home. So again, this lesson will be in that resource sheet available for you to use. And that the lesson, the complete lesson, has that audio prompt that you heard earlier, as well as a couple of other reflection questions for students to answer on their own, and also extensions, opportunities to take that experience further if they want to do more than just listen to that 3-minute prompt. And then next up, we have this Imagine lesson. And this is a really fun one here, where we actually ask students to look a lot, to think a lot about different imagery and visuals that they think of when they think about strawberries, and then to create a poem. And again, this is a lesson that could be taught, is taught in English classes, and fulfills a number of ELA standards. And it's just that the topic, the subject at hand, is a food. And you know, if you combine the previous lesson that we just talked about with this lesson, I think it could result in a really rich experience for students, where they're paying attention to the food that they're eating in a very specific way. And then they're drawing upon that experience to create a poem using those visuals, using that experience that they just had. So I want to note that we have a couple more trainings in this series coming up. On July 28th, we'll have an instructional strategies session that I mentioned earlier. And on August 11th, we'll have a strategies for blending virtual and real life learning. So ways to bring hands-on experiences into the home that are prompted by digital experiences. Registration will open the Wednesday before of each training. And all of these trainings will be made available and recorded. So if you can't attend the live session, all of these will be available in some form online after the fact. We are really lucky to have Wendy Johnson with us. Wendy is a mentor and guide to the Edible Schoolyard, and I wanted to ask Wendy if she could take us through a brief little closing, a little reflection on some of the things that we've heard here in this session today. Are you here, Wendy?
Yes, I am. I just want to express my gratitude for every being who's present, human and more than human. This special day, this time when the great comet is lighting up the night sky. You know, the Neo-Wise comet is reminding us to imagine, to dream, and to take some risks together. So thank you for beautiful teaching and work, Nick and Raquel and the full Edible Schoolyard team, and to each of you, learners and imagination people in all the 10 directions. In closing, I want to encourage you to just, if you've been keeping notes or typing or doing any of that kind of good work, take a moment and just shake off, shake your hands a little bit, really 3 deep breaths, and just shake off to clear and open your heart to reflecting a little bit about today's teaching. And then if it's easy, close your eyes. We began with closed eyes. We began with setting the intention with a willingness to really imagine what is unimaginable. These are unimaginable times, and yet we set our intention out of the world that is unimaginable, not yet seen, and completely realizable when we work together across curriculum, across our challenges. So we begin with setting intention and tasting the sweetness, the bright, sharp sweetness of our work together. And now, please, let's just take 3 deep breaths together and offer the merit of our time together back to a very hungry world. So 3 deep breaths. In and out. And again, breathe like an ancient reptile coming up out of the primal ooze. Breathe with all your organs. And release. Now, mindfulness and good education begins always with heart and mind together in the present moment. So thank you. We dedicate the merit of this afternoon together to the miracle of learning together, imagining, reflecting, creating, connecting. I wrote out those words and noticed that they're a way of spelling lyric. We're looking at a lyrical way of learning based on the music of all of our connectedness and willingness to experiment and make new, fresh music. So we dedicate the merit of this afternoon together and all of the teaching across every curriculum dreamed of, born to be born, to your steady, successful, deep work, and to each of your students, and to the living world with so many opportunities now. And I'm so grateful to be included and to be inspired by all of you. Thank you very much for including me.
Thank you, Wendy. And with going off of that new music, we're going to have an opportunity to create some new music coming up. So I mentioned earlier that we're going to have a little half-hour participatory extension for those of you who would like to stay on. And we have honestly a curriculum development game. We've created a game for you all to play where you get to create your own cross-curricular lessons. And so I hope you will stay for that. And at the same time, I recognize that some of you may have other opportunities to get to in the next few minutes. So I do want to say thank you for those of you who are going to head out. I want to say thank you for being here. Thanks for learning with us and for sharing your ideas on that Padlet. I will be sending out, again, a resource link sheet. And actually, Russell can pop that in the chat right now so that folks have that. That, again, has the links to all of the lessons that we've used in this lesson, that we've referenced in this lesson, and all of the external resources that we've talked about as well. I encourage you to use these resources, use these lessons. All of our lessons are put online with the intention that other teachers, other educators can use them and share them. So please do, and please let us know if you are using them. We have a survey on the Edible Education at Home page where you can let us know how you're using those resources. And then I do want to thank some of our sponsors that made this event possible today. I want to thank the Jaffe Family Foundation. I want to thank the Leslie Family Foundation, the Simon Strauss Foundation, and the Whole Kids Foundation as well for making this webinar series possible and available at no charge for all of you here today. So we have a little curriculum design game. And this is something that Raquel and I thought up coming out of a conversation of how do we encourage folks to really flex their cross-curricular design muscles, to get comfortable, to play around with this. And so you're going to need a die. I mentioned in the email yesterday that you would need a die from a board game. And if you don't have one, we actually have a digital one that you can use. So Russell, if you could pop that in the chat right now, that link to that online die. But the way that this game is going to work is that you'll roll a number for each of these 3 columns. So I'm actually going to go ahead and pull up this free online die myself so I can do this. And I'm going to roll the die, and I am getting a 6 the first time. So my subject is going to be corresponding with that 6 there, English and language arts. And I'm going to roll this again. And I'm getting a 1 that time. So my food is tomatoes. And I'm going to roll it one final time, and it looks like I got a 3. So that is grades 6 to 8. So I'm looking at making a middle school lesson focused on tomatoes and English and language arts. And right now, Raquel and I are just going to model this. We're going to play with this for a second to think of what we can come up with. And again, you all will have a chance to do this. I'm just trying to model it so you can get the sense of it. So Raquel, we're doing English tomatoes at middle school. What's coming to mind for you?
Okay. Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, I think tomatoes, there's like some interesting stuff around like writing recipes maybe. And maybe there's a sort of strengthening the English language, the sort of language arts element is that we could give students different assignments around writing recipes that included like different reflection pieces, like a poem as a reflective piece, an essay that's more of a sort of like food story with those recipes. That might be interesting.
Yeah. My mind jumped to tasting as an activity and having like an activity where they taste a number of different varieties of tomatoes and then use descriptive language, or even, you know, write a simile or a, you know, practice different descriptive writing through a tomato tasting.
Cool. I also thought it would be interesting to like emphasize, I think there's someone said on Padlet, like library research, like how do we, maybe it's like researching sort of the history of tomatoes and sort of flexing more of those, like, what do you think about, what are understanding primary, secondary sources, what is research, what are different ways to do research, that kind of thing.
Okay, cool. Yeah, great idea. All right, so that's an example of what we're going to do, what you're going to do with this curriculum design game. And again, the idea is to keep it lighthearted and fun. Bounce around a couple of ideas. You don't need to stress about finding the perfect idea or building out the perfect lesson plan, but just think about how these foods and subjects can be linked together, and think about how they can be done at different grade levels as well. If you want an extra challenge, you can try rolling the die twice and choose 2 different academic subjects from this column to really try to create a bonus challenge for yourself. So maybe linking science and art with wheat at a K-5 level. You know, that might be your challenge round for yourself or for your group that you're working with.
Or maybe also you could, thinking about adding that other added challenge is included in the subject. Maybe you're also wanting to sort of have it be located in social emotional learning or health and wellness, like another sort of topic that's not necessarily a sort of subject specific topic. Might also be an interesting challenge.
Absolutely. That's a great idea.